Welcome to the show today. Today I have André Wolke, who is the co-founder of Validity Labs, and we're going to talk about a really interesting topic that has a massive potential to disrupt probably the entire business world as we know it in the very near future. So very, very excited about this conversation. So first of all, thank you, Andrea, for being here. And I would like to dive in right into your story. So tell us a little bit more about who you are and give us a little bit of insights into your personal story and your entrepreneurial story.
All right. Well, thank you, Daniel, for the invitation. It's great to be here. I actually started off as being an electronic engineer, and I sort of what I call myself a tech nerd. From the very, very early stages of my life, I already started playing around with hardware. I built all sort of things when I was very young, and I remember. I think I collected all the VCRs back in the days and televisions from my neighbors and repaired them, So I had always a very strong interest in technology. How does things work? I took them apart, put them back together. Mostly it worked. Sometimes they didn't work, but, that's the whole curve of learning, right? Learning by doing. So then in my professional life, I think most of my time, actually, I was very lucky. I had the opportunity to travel the world. I worked for in many industries, various top 500 companies in the space of consultancy. So I work as a consultant, mostly in software, but also in the beginning a bit in the hardware space. In 2011, I came across Bitcoin. Like quite a few of us in this space, they found this very intriguing and interesting. And I also was very fascinated about the technology. And I actually started building my first miner in end of 2011. And it was very exciting. Actually, it's funny. It's staying up there, the little box there is the very first miner. So it's sort of my shrine. If you want so. Then I got very interested in it, and very quickly I found out that it doesn't really work well at your home. Your energy level was increasing, electricity became an issue. Lights went off very often, and not to mention the heat. It was okay for the winter times, but as soon as spring emerged. I heard very often the term, "This is a sauna here. Can you please do something?" 2012, I actually moved into bigger offices and created my first mining company. Stopped doing that by 2014. Reason being, I was doing it on the side still, spent many, many hours in the night fixing stuff, and you sort of get in the notion of, how many rigs are down? Do I have to do something? You have to change something. Damn, I have to go and fix it. And this was sort of getting a bit nerve-wracking after a few years. And also what was not to be underestimated was the race that started to come online with all the ASICs. You actually had to start investing lots of money. The prices went down, and not really knowing where it was going, I decided, rather being the chicken, not really wasting my money or investing it in a risk factor, and decided I have to do something else. It was very fun. It was a massive learning curve. It was super interesting. And still today, I actually do some mining occasionally and play around with the hardware, building a few rigs just to see, and show how things work. We also do this here at Validity Labs to basically educate people about how mining works. Then I started to look at the technology itself. I was quite curious about what else can you do with it. And I think the past 8 years of my professional life, or my past life, if you want, so I worked in the finance industry for a major bank. And increasingly, I became frustrated about my position there, about the work I'm doing, because I wasn't really doing anything that matters. And, not being the youngest anymore, I had this notion of, what the heck am I doing here, right? So I started to question if there's not something else that should I be looking at. That sort of makes sense, to do something that makes sense in your life rather than just going to work, be the good bee and just do your task, all over again, every year the same shit, basically. 2015, I decided I have to do something else. And I went full on becoming an entrepreneur. We founded Validity Labs with the notion of doing something that matters to others. And I think I said it to you at some point earlier that not being a surgeon, not being able to save life, the next option there was for me is to educate people with something that I know. And that was basically our mission. So with Validity Labs, we wanted to create a company that will educate people in the blockchain space. Of course, enterprise driven, so that we would use companies that we help understand what is blockchain, how does the technology works, what can you do with it, and how do you build stuff with it. And while doing so, it was a pretty excited time. So we started off not really knowing where this whole thing is going to go. We started off with a couple of workshops. They were really sold out in a couple of days. It was, or in hours even, I think the first one. And we asked a question, okay, what's the problem? Are we too cheap, or is that really such a big interest? I think it was a mix of both. We started off very, very cheap in the beginning, figured out, okay, we have to work on our price structures. And then we became very excited in this entire space. We built a lot of workshops and courses around that, did a lot of conferences, keynote speaking, anything you can imagine, and the traction was really big. So Validity Labs was born. What I was fascinated about is that from day one, we had already a lot of support from the academic world, specifically the ETH Zurich. So this was fantastic because this is also one of my really strong angles. So just to give an intro here.
I love that. And also, like there's a couple of points that I specifically love about what you said. One of them is when you started out, you didn't know exactly where it was going. So you didn't have a 10-year master plan necessarily in mind. You knew what your bigger vision is. I mean, you wanted to do something that matters, and you had a bit of a clearer idea, obviously, than just that, right? But you didn't know exactly the 10-year step-by-step plan, because that's nonsense these days, right? So that's kind of like one thing I'm really fascinated about with your story, because you started out based on a passion you have, based on something that really drives you to make an impact in a certain space that you're fascinated by. And you leverage all of these things that you collected over the years, the experience and the strengths and the talents and your own personal growth, and you put it into a company that is now growing at an insane space. You just emailed me last week. You just hired a whole bunch of new people now, and it's just going really, really nicely. So I love the story. Just maybe one thing there about entrepreneurship. So becoming an entrepreneur is always an interesting step. It's sort of like the way I define entrepreneur is not necessarily just to have a startup and get investors on board. For me, being an entrepreneur is more about taking charge of your own life. That's sort of like, I think, the essence of being an entrepreneur. So, and it's usually the harder path than, just being comfortable somewhere else. So I'm curious about this, like what inspired you to become an entrepreneur? Do you feel you've been born with entrepreneurship, or is this something you acquired along the way?
That's a great question, Daniel. I'm not sure I will be able to answer it properly. Am I born with it? I guess I'm somebody who's driven. So, and I definitely am a visionary. I started very early in my life. I have came up with lots of ideas. Can't say that they all have been successful, but it's learning by doing. I'm always somebody who just stands up again and starts again. And I think this is one of the very important things that an entrepreneur should have, that whenever he fails, he doesn't quit. He just looks at it, see what he made wrong, and then he starts again, right? And you know, you can be lucky that every company that you start is going to be a success, but mostly it's not the same way, right? So I think it's very important that you believe in yourself and actually really do what you want to do. And if you don't succeed, you just start again. I mean, that is, in my opinion, one of the most important ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's sort of, so it sounds like for you, it's more of a life philosophy than anything else. It's just how you live life. I mean, when you talked about, being an engineer and, just, I mean, as a boy, disassembling and reassembling tech toys and things like that. It's sort of like, the same thing, just like figuring out how problems work, figuring out how to solve them. And it's just more of a philosophy of life. So I really love that. So we arrived at today. I want to talk a little bit about what's up today. So tell us a little bit about Validity Labs, what you're up to right now, what's sort of like happening, and what is most exciting right now.
Right. So what are we doing? Obviously, Validity Labs is still doing a lot in the education space. We run several workshops in different categories about, very often the starter package, like, what is blockchain? How does it work? We get invited by many top 500 companies to do like an introduction to blockchain to their staff. Then we have companies, they have full stack developers and want to basically move them into dApp developers, smart contract developers. So we train their forces in one of the programs and turn them into smart contract developers over the course of like a week or something. Then the other side, which has emerged probably in the last, I would say, 12 months, we have, or even 12 to 14 months, we have started to build a lot of projects. So companies came and had courses and workshops with us and always with the same question. They ask, okay, now we do know that we can build something now from, the workshops we did. However, we don't feel comfortable with our, let's say, very short experience into this. Can you not help us build, a prototype? And that's what we have been doing. So over the past 12 months, we had the opportunity to build prototypes in many different industries, which is for us also pretty amazing because we had a look behind the scenes, how many industries really work, processes and so on. I mean, we are very lucky that between Sebastian and myself, we have very big know-how in different industries already, but you still touch so many new industries that we have absolutely no clue about how they really function. And it's fascinating to learn more about them. And it gets even more fascinating looking at all the new potential businesses that are coming in the future. Just to give you a couple of ideas. We have some projects in the autonomic in the car industry, autonomic, that's a word today, industry, where we basically work on fully autonomous vehicles. So self-driving cars, they basically own themselves and use blockchain technology to ensure that they can finance them, right? So smart contract-driven payment system for that car. So this is a future idea still, of course. The regulators doesn't allow at this point in time that you have a self-driving car somewhere on the road. But these people believe that this is going to happen, and it's exciting for us to be part of such a project. Same is for drones. So basically the future delivery system, future DHL systems potentially are going to be by air, by drones delivered. And there's companies that already believe within 10 years we will have a fully functional transport system by drones. And again, we are lucky to be part of such projects. that they get the insight and is fascinating. I myself fly drones in my spare time, and I love it. It's great. So being part there to do something useful with these things, even greater. What else do we do? So we build stuff. Obviously, we do over the past, let's say, 8-9 months. We started quite a bit in the ICO space. So we built the technical implementation for initial coin offerings, meaning that we write the smart contracts for the fundraisers. And what we do also is the security code audits for such smart contracts.
Yeah. I love that. So it's really fascinating, like how you dive into different areas. One of them being sort of more the old school companies, so to say, that are, sort of catching up to certain things, but want to really, catch up with the technology of tomorrow, which is one side. The other side is sort of like those very futuristic areas like self-driving cars, delivery drones and things like that. Very, very exciting. And that also brings me to the next part, which is sort of the future. I want to talk a little bit about the impact on the impact of blockchain on business itself. But before we do that, maybe let's do a crash course in a minute or two or something like that. What is blockchain in some of the most simplest words, and then let's dive a little bit more into the applications and the actual impact.
That's a very tough question, specifically when you say in a couple of words or a minute. I was yesterday on a conference at the Swiss Stock Exchange, and it's still difficult today to speak to people. It was a topic about blockchain, but unfortunately, it came across very much about Bitcoin. People still associate Bitcoin with blockchain. So I think the first thing I have to say is Bitcoin has nothing to do with blockchain today. Bitcoin is the mother of all blockchains, and that's where it stops. So today, when we talk about blockchain at Validity Labs, we don't even just talk about the ledger, who is keeping all the transaction and making these transactions secure in the peer-to-peer fashion. We actually have in the back of our mind many technologies. I think blockchain has become such a buzzword that it's very difficult to put it in one sentence. What is it really? When you build a platform, it doesn't matter what it is, anything, and you say you need blockchain for it, that means that you have multiple parties. They want to have a consensus about something. However, the ledger, let's say the database, the immutable database, which stores these transactions that can be validated by all parties, that is not the only part of it. Say, for example, you have a document management system of some sort. Somewhere there will be always documents that need to be stored. These documents are not stored in the ledger. They are stored somewhere off-chain. And then we go into other technologies. They are also blockchain-like. Give an example, IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, where you have also the capability of securing documents in a very you can store these documents in a very secure fashion using very secure methods. But obviously, these are not 100% related to the ledger itself. Same thing for an IoT. Today, when you speak to companies, IoT devices play a big role. You speak in, we have a lot of projects in the supply chain areas. So just looking at transport of any goods or services. Give an example in the medical space, when the transport of medicine, pills, etc., pp, they are under very high regulations, for example, of temperature. So if during the delivery the temperature rises over a certain amount of times, then the package is invalid, right? So that means they can't sell the items. And with IoT devices, they measure, for example, the temperature, send this information into a blockchain where you then basically can audit the information and have other ways of basically automatically ensure that you know exactly when a breach has been done. Gives the entire supply chain the possibility to monitor this and make it more efficient at the end of the day.
Okay, so kind of like, so if I try to put it into a couple of pieces, and correct me if I'm completely off track here. So blockchain is sort of the essence technology. Whenever, so it's like now kind of like what it's mostly used for. It's most interesting is when different parties come together, they need to find a consensus. So it's less about what is blockchain. I think that's even the wrong question. The right question is what is the most common use format for it. I guess that's more of an interesting question. So that's sort of like where it comes into play, and then it's more of an enabler for many other technologies built on top of it or next to it in those areas, like with IoT together, and using it for those certain specific applications together with other technologies. Is that sort of like going in the right direction?
Yes, David, you can potentially say it's two separate questions. I mean, what is blockchain, of course, is a very valid question. But again, then I would ask the question, okay, how do you define blockchain? If we just talk about the ledger database that secures the consensus, that's one part. Yes, it is the blockchain in the initial naming convention, maybe badly chosen. Today, we use terms like DLT, distributed ledger technology. Maybe this is a bit more fitting. However, again, here we have a differences between those two technology types, because in distributed ledger technology, we very often hear terms like private blockchains, where only very limited amount of parties secure the consensus. Now, is that same than the initial blockchain type, where you have 30,000 plus nodes securing the network? Probably not. Now, I think the terminologies today, they are, let's say, not very wisely chosen. It's the same for smart contracts. Smart contracts is probably one of the dumbest terms I have ever heard, because a smart contract is actually a dumb contract. Um, I mean, like, the smart contract does what you tell him to do, right? He doesn't do anything automatically. So, yeah, but I think already Nick Szabo said at some point, who is the inventor of the smart contract, some point in the 90s, that the name could have been chosen better. But yeah.
I love that. So it's an interesting space there, especially with those terminologies, and I think that's also what's confusing for some people. Where in other areas, it's like, okay, what it's called, that's what it is, and there's so much that goes around blockchain. I think that's sometimes confusing for people. So thank you for clarifying that. Now I'd like to talk a bit more about the impact of blockchain and the technology of blockchain on business. You mentioned a couple of pieces. You mentioned self-driving cars, delivery drones, basically, which are going to have a huge impact, hopefully, very hopefully, on the future. What are some of the main areas where you see in the next 5-10 years blockchain to have the biggest impact, and why do you think that's the case?
That's a very good question as well. So where do I see that? I guess one part for sure is micropayments. Finance, I mean, have worked in the bank, I can give you quite a few good examples for blockchain technology that potentially I actually have not seen yet anybody doing, to be fair. But just the most obvious one is for sure micropayments. That is definitely something that could be interesting. This is going to happen and will bring big value. The second thing I see is the ownership, rights management. And I think there you see many different type of projects, and there is a big need for it. So let's just, for example, say authors of books, like to ensure that, anybody know that you are having the rights of the book that you wrote. The same for movies, the same for music. That goes even further. And I think it gets even more important when we say, for example, that you use these technologies to ensure that you can prove the ownership of your own land. Think about countries, they have civil wars or other problems. where people being thrown out of the country for whatever reason. And then, the government takes over the position or the land they owned, or some other people do. And I think if you consider that potentially your family has for centuries owned a specific land, then all of a sudden you've been thrown out and everything is taken away that you ever owned, and you can't prove that this is yours. This is a problem. And I think the problem is massive today. So with blockchain technology, you could definitely have an authorization service that would prove that you own a specific part of land on this planet. And there's projects like that out there. I think one of them is called Ben, which does exactly that. I think these type of projects will definitely succeed, and they solve a problem. And I think this is the biggest question that we always ask our clients as well. What problem do you really solve? One other problem which I think is going to be solved, which is very interesting, is actually in the academic field, in the research and development field. We ourselves are very interested in this space, and I think something that we're going to see is along the line of collaborative research. If you can imagine that, many research around the world in different things, medical research, whatever it is, there's thousands and thousands of researchers doing the same thing every day. They don't know of each other. They have no clue that they were exactly the same thing. There is actually no Google for researchers, an index system that you can look up. Did anybody already did this test that I do today, or last week, or for the last month, or the last year? There have been precedents where even in cancer research, two researchers for over 30 years, not knowing each other, worked on the same solution, and they came to the same conclusions. So they basically wasted 30 years of their life doing the same thing. This is a shame, really. And I think blockchain technology, with obviously some add-ons and machine learning and so on, could potentially provide a way how you could do collaborative research, meaning that every researcher is capable of accessing any data that has ever been recorded in his own space, to then come much faster to cure something, some disease. So actually doing something that matters for people.
I love that. I mean, the cases you gave, especially the cases you dive into, they're not just purely business driven. They're also driven by a much greater mission. With the research, I mean, it's to me every day it's astonishing, how much research is done around the world and how little people actually talk with each other. And in that case, I see blockchain as an actual enabler for that collaboration. In research, it's a great example because it's such a huge, massive field, and it's not like it's not the field that is most known for collaboration. Even in one country between two companies that basically follow a similar mission, I mean, they try to keep their gardens as much as possible, and this would actually allow even companies that may be competing with each other to find different solutions to work together at some point and find different models to work together. It's very, very, very inspiring. So I love these two examples. Is there something else in the business sector specifically where you say maybe, with the technologies, hardware technologies, for example, that now or maybe in the near future come onto the market, this could not only be an accelerator, but it may even be like the thing that actually makes that technology work, or without blockchain, it would be unethical maybe to have that technology on the market, or it would simply be impossible to actually have it work?
I think that's a difficult question because I would answer that as an opposite question to the many asking what blockchain is still going to be around in 5 years. What does the technology look? I mean, we're accelerating so fast that I think the question is, how does the future really look like in terms of technology? Do we still use the same Ethereum's, hyperledgers of this world, or is there something completely new coming out? But what we do see is that next to the examples I already mentioned, something else probably is emerging in the food market. I think the food the food market also is going to benefiting a lot from blockchain technology and specifically IoT space. We have been involved in a couple of projects where it really goes into amazing fields. I mean, I was told, and I have to say, I don't know much about the food industry, how everything works, but I was told, the whole biofood is quite, let's say, a heist. So to say nicely, and tracking the food from actually where it comes from, from the producer to when it comes into the store, using devices that are capable of delivering you information that you can go into a shop with your mobile phone and you say, I'm a diabetic, and instead of choosing the tomato from supplier X, I will take the tomato of supplier Y because it has no sugar in it. So basically, it is existing already today. They have sensor technology. They can measure all this information, put them use blockchain technology for that to record this, including the entire life chain, even not just tomatoes, but I think even meat. Where does the meat come from that you're eating today? Did cow Elsa had a good life? Did she went on the farm every day, or was it really a nasty cattle farm that you see in the US very often? So because obviously the meat is different then as well. I mean, everything is different, flavors and the vitamins and minerals in the food. So I think this specific area is going to be getting really big. And IoT and blockchain technology do play a big role into this space because it will bring transparency towards how this whole chain works. Because today, really, most people don't understand how food works and where it comes from and what's being put on all the stuff. It's pretty crazy.
Absolutely, yeah, especially in the bio sector, which is, I mean, bio is sort of like couple of years ago, 5 or 10 years ago, it was just like bio, but now you have all these thousands of variations of different levels and different things. Absolutely. I love it. Very inspiring example as well. So one more question about the company specifically. So what's sort of your vision 2-3 years out with the company? What's sort of like the bigger picture for you?
Yes. So what do we want to do? Number one, we want to make a very clear footprint in Switzerland. Validity Labs is born in Switzerland. It's located in Crypto Valley, Zug. We definitely want to grow here. That's our number one goal. Number two is that with our academic affiliations, we want to grow as well very strong. We want to be one of the leaders in academic research around blockchain. Surely one of the parts, and we also want to be recognized as one of the companies they produce stuff that people need, in the blockchain world or not. But so basically building platforms, growing a massive community of knowledgeable people around the space, because I think this is one of the big challenges as well, that there is not enough skill sets, and we want to help that this is going to change. That's why we really work on the part to bring this also in universities, working there very strongly together with academic partners to hopefully create the first master's and bachelor program in the very near future.
I love that. I mean, last time we talked, you talked about the summer school that you're doing. You've done it very, very successfully with around 100 students, I think, right?
So the next one is going to be in February, and it's going to be 300 to 500 students that will be invited.
Amazing. I love that. So this is really, really exciting stuff that's going on. So with those goals, with that vision 2 or 3 years out, if you could just mention a couple of things that if you had access to them, resources, capabilities, anything around that, will make the whole acceleration, the progress much, much easier. What would some of those things be? Could you pick something?
That's probably not so easy to answer, but I think the biggest challenge that we have is skills, right? So even for us, so I think it's a combination of two. we are a startup, right? So it's always interesting to see when I meet people for interviews that we like to hire, and you ask them the question, so what is your financial expectations? And please be in mind, we are a startup. Startup doesn't, even a successful startup doesn't even mean that, we bank millions and millions. But it's the challenge is to find free-minded people. They're interested to be part in a new area that's happening and willing to learn new things. And I think this is one of the key things that would help. But right now, I think we are not there. I mean, people are still way too much interested in the daily salary, in the monthly salary, that, they can go to holiday. They don't take risks. So I think it will take some time before people understand that this is also a massive opportunity, that when you start today, that in 10 years' time, you will be one of the experts in this field. And then you can start charging again your big salaries.
That's a really interesting topic, maybe a whole topic for a different conversation, but that's sort of like what I'm very passionate about as well. It's sort of like, we don't really, especially in Switzerland, but everywhere around the world, we don't educate entrepreneurs. We educate corporate drones. And it's not a very futuristic thing, because that's not really where the future is going. So I'm very much on the same page with you, and I'm, and I think we need more of those kinds of people that really see opportunities, like that are coming up in the future and buy into those opportunities, basically. And I think we need more of such a culture. I think it's more of a culture, a much, much deeper thing than just a talent question. I think it's even deeper. It's a culture thing. It's a value system thing. Also Switzerland with conformity and safety and things like that. So that is a great topic. I mean, so if people are out there in that sector interested in going deeper, interested in learning, and they're entrepreneur minded, that's certainly something that you're looking to have access to. So that's perfect. Great. So last question: where can people connect with you, learn more about you, learn more about the company?
Right. So I think foremost the easiest way is to go into our website. You can check out what we do there. There's my contact details also there. You can connect by email, no problem. I'm also on Twitter. So actually it's my name, André Wolke. So just easy to find. I'm also on LinkedIn. So the usual social places you find. If you want to meet me, I also run the biggest blockchain meetup in Switzerland in 3 cities, Zurich, Geneva, and Basel. Every month we have in Geneva and Zurich one, and every 2 months in Basel. So people can come and join us there, of course. I'm usually hosting the Zurich event, sometimes also the Geneva one. That's the place where you can meet me, yes.
Perfect, excellent. So we're going to link to those sources below the video. So thank you so much, André, for being here, for sharing your story, sharing your insights into the blockchain revolution. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel, for having me. It was a great pleasure and great honor. Thank you.